coming out today. I'm really excited to be here. When I woke up this morning, I had no idea I was going to give a talk, so I hope it goes okay. Unfortunately for you, and very fortunately for me, I don't have a live demo like Graham, so all I have to hope for is that the slides advance properly. So what I wanted to talk about today, though, was this idea of high-performance software delivery and operations. As you know by now, my name is Nathen Harvey. What you probably don't know is that my father misspelled my name, but now you can see that. In fact, he was such an asshole, he misspelled my name and all of my siblings' names. So if you want to know how they were all misspelled, you can see me at the happy hour and I'll fill you in. And maybe I talk more bad stuff about my dad. I love him. I love you dearly, Dad. If you're watching the video, thank you for giving me a globally unique identifier. I appreciate it. Yeah. So we've seen this slide before, right? And I think that fundamentally we've talked about this all day long. It started with Jennifer's talk this morning. We came here because we believe in this idea of DevOps. And DevOps was fundamentally started with this idea that development and operations simply don't have goals that are aligned with one another. And when I think about this, I actually go back to pretty early in my career. One of the things that I did is I worked at a supply chain software company. And we went on site to a manufacturing facility. And this manufacturing facility made breakfast cereals. So they were making and shipping breakfast cereals so we could all have a good, healthy morning, a nice start to our morning, right? And we talked to a couple of people there. We were in the supply chain software business, so the first people that we talked to were the inventory managers. We said, listen, you're an inventory manager. What is your job? And more importantly than what is your job, how does your bonus work? How do you get paid? What gets you promoted? And they said, well, we get a bonus and I get promoted, my team gets viewed as successful when we have just-in-time inventory. The inventory lands on the store shelves, consumers buy it, they walk out. Before we run out, there's more inventory on the shelves. But inventory is always flowing through the system. We don't have to store any inventory. And we thought, oh, that sounds pretty good. And in fact, if you think about software, that's kind of how we want it too, right? We want this continuous delivery. But then we went and we talked to the plant manager. And the plant manager and their team were responsible for actually producing the breakfast cereal. And we asked them the same question. How are you incentivized? How do you get a bonus? What gets you promoted? And the plant manager said, our incentive plan is super simple. Every quarter, we get paid on the tonnage of cereal that we've produced. So think about that for a minute. At the end of each quarter, maybe we're 3 weeks out from the end of the quarter, the manager's looking at their results so far. They haven't created enough cereal yet for the team to get a bonus. They have two choices. I can make Raisin Bran, or I can make Rice Krispies. Which do you think they make? No, tonnage. They get paid more for tonnage. They do not make Rice Krispies. They make the Raisin Bran because it is heavier. And you know what? Every quarter, the plant gets their bonus. Every quarter, the inventory manager is skating along. Inventory is just flying through. 3 weeks into the end of the quarter, 3 weeks out, there goes their bonus plan. All of a sudden, there's all this cereal stacking up. Because how many of you have ever had a Rice Krispie treat? Yeah? And how many of you have ever had a Raisin Bran treat? Yeah. It's not really a treat, right? That's your healthy breakfast. And when you think about that, that is exactly what we've set up for our industry. And hopefully, by being here today, we've realized the flaw in this plan, right? We tell developers, build things fast, ship features as quickly as you can. And then we turn to our operators and we say, slow things down. We don't actually tell them to slow things down. We say, keep everything stable, keep everything running. So we set up this inherent bias, this inherent conflict between the two organizations. And DevOps came along, and as it started, it focused on these two groups, development and operations. And we said, you know what we need to do? We need to collaborate. We need to work together and deliver the right things to our customers to make our customers happy and to help keep our business moving forward. But over time, what's happened is that DevOps, the definition of DevOps, the impact of DevOps has moved beyond development and operations. And so what I'd like to do is give you a definition, my definition of the word DevOps. And this is sort of in the best spirit of DevOps. This is an open source definition of DevOps. You too can become a subscriber of this definition of DevOps simply by putting a pull request against a README. The URL is there. But let me tell you this definition. So DevOps is a cultural and professional movement focused on how we build and operate high-velocity organizations born from the experiences of its practitioners. That is my canonical definition of the word DevOps. So let's just spend a minute with that. First, it's a cultural and professional movement. DevOps is not a tool. You cannot go to any one of the software vendors out there and say, I don't know, maybe you walk up to the chef booth and you see Paul standing behind the table there and you say, Paul, we're ready for the DevOps. Please, I want to buy 5 units of DevOps. Well, first, Paul will say 5 units is not enough. But then you'll remind him, no, we're going on a transformation and it's an incremental thing. So we're going to buy 5 units this year. But next year I'm going to turn up and I'm going to want to buy 20. And the year after that I'm going to buy 100. Of course, Paul isn't going to sell you those things. You cannot buy DevOps. It is a cultural and professional movement. It's not a tool. It's a philosophy. It's a mindset. It's how do we think about the work that we're doing? How do we think about the business that we're in and who our customers are? Next, it's focused on how to build and operate a high-velocity organization. Makes sense. Build, operate, dev, ops. But you know what? If you want to create a truly high-velocity organization, you don't do that by focusing on 2 departments within that organization. DevOps is all of us. And frankly, this is one of the problems I see with DevOps. I think DevOps is a terrible word. And we can demonstrate it quite easily. When DevOps first came out, there were a bunch of people in QA, a bunch of testers that said, wait, what about us? It should be called Dev QA Ops. And now today we have the security professionals saying, wait, it has to be secure. Let's call it DevSecOps. This can go on ad infinitum. We will end up with this word that is just a bunch of syllables strung together to represent everyone. The truth is, DevOps is about creating a high-velocity organization, and in order to do that, we need the whole organization on board. And I don't mean just the technical parts of the organization. Of course, it's dev and ops and QA and SRE. But it's also HR and finance. Finance. How does finance play into DevOps? How many of you have moved from a data center into the cloud? You have to understand the language of finance. You have shifted from capital expenditures, or CapEx, into operational expenditures, or OpEx. And if you don't understand the difference between those two, it's okay. But you have to partner with your finance team so that you can do budgeting properly. When it comes to HR, how is HR involved in DevOps? Well, if we look at lean and agile and these new software development practices, oftentimes what we talk about are small teams coming together, building and shipping a feature, and then those teams disbanding. Do your HR practices allow for that to happen? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I know many organizations I've walked into, they say, Nathan, we're about to go on a DevOps transformation. What's the org chart supposed to look like? Let's start there. Well, that's not the right place to start. It starts with the mindset. It starts with doing the work, not simply changing the org chart. The last phrase of this sentence here, DevOps is born from the experiences of its practitioners. What does that mean? That means that the DevOps that's practiced at ANZ Bank is different than the DevOps that's practiced at Google, is different than the DevOps that's practiced at Netflix. And the truth is, you understand your business better than anyone else. You understand the politics of your organization better than anyone else. And you understand the systems within your organization better than anyone else. So not only can't you go out and buy DevOps, you can't really even hire in a DevOps professional to push you through this. You are the ones that have the skills and the context and the belief and care and love for your customers to drive your organization through this transformation. And the way that you do that is going to be specific to who you are. and who your customers are. Over the last 5 years or so, there has been surveys done across our industry that each year have culminated in a State of DevOps report. Have any of you in the audience read the State of DevOps report? All right, I see a good number of hands. Well, there is an incredible amount of data in these State of DevOps reports. Again, as I mentioned, they've been published over the last 5 years. And in fact, in 2017, they released a book that was a summary of the first 4 years of data. I'll talk about that book in a little bit. And then they released this one, the 2018 State of DevOps report. And what I'd like to do is just dig in a little bit to the findings there and how those findings can help you on your own DevOps journey. So one of the coolest things I think that the State of DevOps report does is it actually moves away from the term DevOps. And it focuses on these two things, software delivery and operations performance. That's what we measure. So yes, DevOps does include finance, it includes marketing, it includes HR. But in this report, we're going to focus in on the technical capabilities of the people in this room. How do technical practitioners implement and accelerate through DevOps? And they focus on 4 key metrics. These 4 key metrics are the balancing of throughput and reliability. So we had Jennifer this morning talking about SRE. SRE gives us things like error budgets that are a great mechanism for us to balance throughput and reliability. And in the State of DevOps report, they ask questions about what is your current throughput and reliability. And they look at 4 key metrics, as I mentioned. The first is delivery lead time. How long does it take from the time your code goes into the source code repository until the time it's in your production environment? That's the measure of delivery lead time. The next thing they look at is how frequently are you deploying code? Now, I know my experience is not the same as your experience. And I'm sure that none of you have ever experienced this. I have definitely worked at a software company that printed custom apparel when we had new releases. Version 6 is out. Everyone gets a t-shirt. Can you imagine that? If you're a software company, you can't print custom t-shirts every time there's a software release, because then you're a t-shirt company. So our deployment frequency is the second metric that they look at. The third metric is your time to restore service. Now, we've heard a lot about this today, from Maddie's talk to Amy's talk just now. How do we recover when there is an outage? So we think about the time to restore service. Service went down, we have an incident. How do we declare that incident? How do we recover from that? How long does that take? And then the fourth metric that they look at is the change fail rate. Change failure rate, what does that mean? It means I have a change, piece of software that I've changed or what have you, and I take that change and I put it into my production environment. And if I put it into my production environment and the immediate response is, oh shit, that's a change fail rate. That's a change failure. If that change causes an incident, we need to count that. We need to measure that. So if we look at these 4 metrics, this is how we can quantify DevOps. This is how we can zero in on what is our organization doing, how are we performing against these 4 metrics, and what do we need to do to improve them. And in fact, if you start to think about each of these 4 metrics, you will quickly realize that it's not just a single tool that will address them. And in fact, if you look at any one of them, it's never just a tool. It's the tools, it's the people, it's the process, it's the mindset. All of them play into impacting each one of these 4 metrics. And the cool thing about the State of DevOps report is it actually, because it's survey-based and they go out across the entire industry, they can actually take every survey respondent and break them into buckets. There are low-performing teams, there are medium-performing teams, high-performing teams, and with the 2018 report, they actually classified an elite-performing team. So you can compare where your organization is across the entire IT industry. Where do you compare Are you a low performer or a high performer? But what they found that is extremely important is that those metrics actually drive real business value. What they see are that 46 times more frequent deploys. How many of you feel like our business could benefit by deploying 46 times more frequently? I tell you what, your CEO does. Your customers do. They want to see that innovation. And heck, we all want to be innovating. We all want to be driving that. But at the same time, they have 2,604 times faster restoring of service when there's a failure. One of the most important things that this State of DevOps report tells us, in my mind, is that in order to move fast, you have to move safe. And in order to be safe, you have to move fast. Many of us work at or have experience with organizations that are extremely risk intolerant. I am afraid of risk. I want to slow down. I want to be safe. The truth is, you have to be fast to be safe. And the easiest way for me to explain that to you, or the easiest example for me to give you, this rarely happens, but from time to time, our industry discovers that there were vulnerabilities in common software libraries. Yeah. It doesn't happen very often, it's okay. But when we do discover that there's a vulnerability in a software library, typically, when that gets reported, in most good cases, along with that comes a patch to that library. Well, if you're an organization that's using that library and you are super risk averse, you know that your systems are vulnerable to that particular exploit. But you don't know how to move fast. You organizationally don't have the muscle that it takes to push a change through very quickly. And so therefore, what you've done by going slow is you've increased the risk that you have. And I know, we're risk averse, but don't worry, Nathan, we have emergency change procedures. So when that happens, we can jam a change through very quickly. And you know what happens? What does an emergency change procedure look like? We take all these guardrails that make sure that we're safe as we move towards production, and we take them all away. And we just jam that change through. And again, I'm sure it's never happened to you, but in my experience, when you take away those guardrails and push a change through, what you do is cause more problems and have to push more change through. So if we want to be safe, if we want to reduce risk, we have to build the muscle, the organizational muscle, the organizational know-how to actually move faster. And part of moving faster, it doesn't mean we get rid of all of the risk, right? We have to have that safety net. We have to think about how do we detect failure and recover from that quickly and build the muscle around that. So the State of DevOps report actually looks across all of these organizations and has identified something like 24 different capabilities that an organization can drill in on and really think about. So I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes or so just giving a quick survey of some of those capabilities. I mentioned there were 24. I don't have nearly enough time to go over 24, although I'll talk about them all night long, if you like. So these capabilities that they talk about focus in 5 different areas. The areas of continuous delivery, the areas of architecture, product and process, lean management and monitoring, and finally, culture. Now, the survey that I'm going to look at, the capabilities that we'll look at today, are focused primarily in the continuous delivery bucket. And they start with the most important thing, version control. I mentioned that first metric is your time from commit to deploy. Every change that you're writing, whether it's a code change or a configuration change, must start by going into a version control system. And by version control system, I don't mean the BAK one. Y'all know that one, right? Have file, copy file to filename.bak. That's my version control system. If something goes wrong, I just copy BAK back. That is not a version control system. Unfortunately, This Wi-Fi here is pretty open, and I've looked in all of your inboxes, and without fail, I found attachments with names like blah, blah, blah underscore final, blah, blah, blah underscore final dot March 2019 dot Jennifer Petoff dot final. That's not version control. We have to use proper version control for all of our systems. If you want to start a DevOps transformation and you aren't putting all of your code and configuration into Git or some other proper version control system, don't do anything else. Start there. You cannot move fast or safe if you cannot control and look at the history of change across your organization and understand how to roll back those changes. This is the most fundamental thing. If you aren't doing this consistently everywhere, stop coming to DevOps conferences, start going online to learn how to Git, period. All right, so we've got version control locked down. The next step is code review. Code review. When you're writing changes, you want to put that change, that code review, that configuration change in front of another engineer to look at that. And you know why we do this? Look, in DevOps, we often talk about this phrase, you build it, you run it. All right, so you write the code, you go and run it. Whether or not you subscribe to that, that's another conversation that we could spend an hour on. But let's just assume for a minute that the code you wrote is going to end up in production. Oftentimes what happens when code runs in production is it breaks, and it's going to wake someone else up to fix that code. The code reviews that you're doing might be for yourself at 3 a.m. You want to make sure that the code that you've written is clear. You want to make sure that it's understandable. And also by asking another engineer to look at your code, someone else has seen it before it gets into production. We can start to share knowledge. Now, there are bits of code review that no human should ever do. Are we using tabs or spaces? No human should ever care about that. Let me rephrase. Every human in this room should care about that. But none of you should have to test each other for are you using tabs or spaces? Are you following the right syntax for our chosen language? You should have tools that do that for you. And that gets to the next capability, continuous integration. As you're writing code, you commit that code to a version control repository. On commit, a couple of things happen. Your changes get automatically tested. You create an artifact from those changes. You compile that into a build. This is what continuous integration is about. And if you want to talk about branching strategies, come find me in a beer, and we'll talk about branching strategies. And I'll give you a preview. The best branching strategy. Who knows it? Let's hear it. That's right. I can sum it up in 3 rules. The best branching strategies. No branches, no branches, no branches. Automated testing. We must have automated testing if we want to move fast. We cannot move fast without a safety net. We need to automate tests. And the thing that we need to do when we think about automated testing is think about where in the life cycle are those tests running. Every engineer should be able to run tests locally. But that engineer should not be expected to run full integration test suite locally. It doesn't make any sense. We have to think about what can we test on our code before that code gets turned into an artifact? What sort of linting or static analysis can we do? What sort of unit testing? What testing do we do after it becomes an artifact? And what testing do we do as it gets closer and closer to our production environment? Start building your muscles around testing. If you aren't writing automated testing today, this is a great opportunity for you to go and find that QA department. Bring them into your work. Sit down and pair with them on how to write tests. You can learn a lot from one another. The next capability that we'll look at is shifting left on security. I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, probably today in this room. What does it mean? It means that we need to think about security at the beginning of the process. Look, Agile taught us we shouldn't have a QA department that we let them figure out all of the quality. As developers, we have to start writing tests for our own code. And do you know whose job is security? It's all of our job. Every single one of us is responsible for security. If you have a security department, you can't expect them to be the ones that just solve all security issues for you. As developers, as we write code, we need to understand, how do we write code in defense? How do we write secure code? What does that even mean? So your friends in the security department, you can laugh at that. Your friends in the security department, right? How many of you have friends in the security department, right? A couple of you do. You're security engineers, aren't you? You're part of the security department, yes. But honestly, look, the first thing you should probably do is find the security department, find an engineer there or someone in charge of security, and invite that person to lunch. Security is the department of no. They stop us from innovating anything, not because they want to. They don't understand the work that we're doing. Let's talk together. Let's get to know one another as humans, and then let's talk about how can we collaborate? How can I start running more security tests locally? How can I learn how to write more secure code? We do all of these things so that we can get to a place where we're doing continuous delivery. Continuous delivery in its best form means that every code commit makes it all the way through to the production environment. Now, that's a journey. That's a journey. I don't expect you, if today what you're doing is printing custom t-shirts, I don't expect you to go home tomorrow, because you'll be here tomorrow. I don't expect you to go back to the office on Monday and say, all right, you know what, boss, we're doing continuous delivery now, so every time code gets committed, it's going to production. We have to think about, what does that actually mean? We have to think about automated testing. We have to think about shifting security left, but we also have to think about, what are our deployment strategies? How do I push out code and understand what is the impact going to be in production? Can I do things like canary deploys, where I'm pushing out a change to a small set of users so that I can see that interacting in the wild, and then progressively roll it out to a larger and larger set? How do I roll that back? How do I do A/B testing? How do I do feature flagging? All of these things can play into that. But continuous delivery is where we're headed. So I know that you can do this. I know, regardless of where you are, you can get to a place that feels and looks and behaves like DevOps. But DevOps is not a destination. It is truly a journey. It's founded on this idea of continuous improvement. And I would argue, beyond continuous improvement, it's about continuous learning. How do we compress those feedback cycles? How do we collaborate more across the business? And collaborating means reaching out to more and more departments. Yes, if you're in operations, start by working with the developers. But understand that you're going to have to collaborate across the entire organization. So start on this journey. Start measuring progress. Think about these 4 metrics. Where does your team sit across these 4 metrics right now? And what are the things that you can do to improve them? So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things here. The first is a reading list. So we have the 2018 Accelerate State of DevOps report, and then we have Accelerate, the book. Now this book is actually the summary of all of the data from the first 4 years of the State of DevOps report, or maybe 5 years. I'm not very good at math, and we all know in computer science, off by 1 errors are completely acceptable. So they took all of the research and they put it into this book, written by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim. All of the data is in here, and the 24 capabilities you will find there. You can think of the Accelerate State of DevOps report from 2018 as the appendix to that book. But in addition to reading these, I have a plea for help. The current State of DevOps report for 2019, the surveying has just begun. So in true DevOps fashion, I've put a QR code into my slides. So please, I invite you to follow either this link or this QR code. I'll not stand in front of it. It's a prettier QR code if I'm in front of it, but it's more functional if I'm not. I invite you, please, to take some time over the next couple of weeks to think about your organization and provide information to the State of DevOps report. By doing so, you are going to help us all improve our practices. And there's one thing that's true about DevOps. It's that adage that a rising tide lifts all ships. We're all going to improve by focusing in on these capabilities. And we can do that better when we have your help with the research. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much.